Hey y'all, it's Katie. I hope everyone's doing well. Today we are finally talking about Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. If for some reason you haven't heard of Turtles All the Way Down, this is John Green's latest novel, his first since The Fault in Our Stars, and it follows a female protagonist named Aza who has obsessive-compulsive disorder and is kind of navigating life and friendship and love, and there's also a kind of crime element, but not like her crime, like solving a crime, mystery. Yeah, sorry, I can't talk. I absolutely adored this book. I honestly was really worried about it before it came out. I used to really love John Green's books, and then after I went through and reread them, I didn't like them nearly as much as I had the first time through. With the exception of The Fault in Our Stars, I hold John Green up on this pedestal in my mind because I just love him so much as a human and as a contributor on YouTube. So I wasn't sure how I would feel about it, but I absolutely adore it. I'm so excited to reread it, honestly. Like, it was so well written, so honest, so candid, and I just can't get over how happy it made me while I was reading it. I also really like this cover. Like, it's so understated, but like the more I look at it, the more I enjoy it, and like obviously you can't feel it, but like it's an interesting material, and I don't know, I'm just digging it. So that is all I have to say without spoiling you. So if you haven't read this yet, go read it, because it's really good and it made me cry a lot, and then come back and we can talk about it. Honestly, I loved almost everything that happened in this book. I thought the plot was so interesting, and I really liked all of the characters. But honestly, what I'm probably going to talk about for almost all of this review is the representation of mental illness, because for me, that was what made this book so good. That was what made me love this so much and made it feel like one of the most well-written books I've read. John Green has acknowledged that he does suffer from OCD. He's acknowledged in the past his struggles with depression. So obviously, he has a lot of personal knowledge when it comes to writing mental illness. And I think people who've dealt with something or experienced something are always going to be the best portrayers of it. I've never experienced OCD, so I can't speak on the accuracy of his claims. And even if I did, everyone's mental illness is different, so I still couldn't say his portrayal was right or wrong necessarily. When we're inside Aza's head, like, it's just so well written. Like, I can understand almost what she's trying to say. It's so hard with mental illness to explain what you're feeling. Always. And that's like the biggest running theme when I'm reading books about mental illness is you can never quite touch on it. So if you haven't felt it, you can't always figure out. But with this, like, you could be there. And with the things that were similar, I definitely felt like, yes, like, that resonates with me. I feel that is exactly what I feel every time this happens. There's also such clear dynamics that we get to see between Aza and her mom and Aza and Daisy, and they're so honest. It's clear that her mom cares and wants to help her and believes what's going on, and she's not the kind of parent to say that mental illness doesn't exist. You know, she's making sure Aza has the resources she needs, but then she's getting frustrated because Aza's not taking the steps that she needs to. And her mom just doesn't understand because she hasn't been there. She just doesn't get, like, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just try to get better? Which I think is a very hard disconnect for a lot of people with mental illness and their parents, or even siblings and friends and just people around them who don't understand. We have Aza and Daisy who are so close and love each other more than anything, but when they have this confrontation, Daisy acknowledges that a lot of the things that Aza does are really frustrating, and yes, you have this mental illness and this is going on, and I'm not going to fault you because you're ill, but that doesn't make an excuse for you being self-centered, for you never ever looking outside of yourself. And we can talk about all kinds of Tumblr posts, we can talk about things that people said in blogs, but this is an ongoing in the mentally ill community. Like, people are starting to really acknowledge, like, hey, like, we have to realize just because you're mentally ill, you can't use that as an excuse to justify poor treatment of the people around you. It doesn't make it okay for you to be a toxic personality. And as Aza addresses in the book, like, dealing with that is significantly less seemingly than what she's going through, but that doesn't change the fact that that's how she's making her best friend feel. That's how little she's contributing, because even, yes, her mental illness is consuming her, but also even when it's not, she's very wrapped up in herself. And it's just so true and such accurate portrayal. And he touched on so many important themes. Like, I can't even express my gratitude to John Green for writing this book. I'm so happy that this book exists, that it's in the world right now. And then, of course, we have Aza's relationship with Davis. As soon as he was introduced as a love interest, I got so agitated. I was just like, oh my god, he's gonna do it. The love can save you trope. It's gonna happen. Because every time I read any book with a protagonist with mental illness or a love interest with mental illness, this is how it happens, and it's the most frustrating thing in the world. And I think this partially comes from us wishing that it were that easy, that we could just find someone to love us and we would slowly but surely be cured, and loving them would be enough to make us better. But that is just not how it works, and loving someone doesn't change your brain chemistry. And I think that that's one of the hardest things for a lot of people, because reading about mental illness, you want it to comfort you, you want to feel that you're not alone, or you want to see that other people have struggles that might be different from yours, but like they're dealing with a similar thing, and you want to understand how they're dealing with it, or how they're living, or what's happening. And then you're seeing this happen, but it's not going to happen in real life because it's not real. That's just not how it works. There's that quote that goes around every once in a while. I see it on my Tumblr and just want to squeeze a stress ball. But it's like, you can't love someone until you love yourself. Which is almost the opposite of the love can save you trope. And it's also false. And these are like the two biggest things being pushed on us. It's just so wrong, and it's so frustrating, and I can only laugh when I think about it, because otherwise I will get so upset, because it's not fair that this is what we're getting, because this is an accurate representation, and it's not what I want. I don't want to see these things that I know are false that are just going to make me longing for something that won't happen, that I don't want to happen. You can't rely on a person to become the reason that you're not mentally ill anymore, because what happens if they leave? What happens if something happens to them? This is turning into a life talk, but you should never emotionally or mentally depend on another person for your health or well-being or happiness. Love people. They can so be integral to your happiness. They can be a huge part of it. They can be what does make you happy, but they can't be all of it. They can't be the only reason. That's toxic. You can't live like that. And she just has that thing about bacteria, and thinking about it just kills her, and it sends her into these spirals all the time. And the first time her and Davis go to kiss, I'm like, this is it. Like, even though she can't bear to think about bacteria, somehow she's gonna overcome it because she loves him or wants to kiss him or whatever. But she doesn't. And even as the story goes on and they get closer, and it's not any kind of statement on her love for him, because she does love him. She cares so much for him, and she continues to, but that doesn't override her mental illness. It doesn't cancel it out. They're not two negative numbers. It's, I love you, but I am mentally ill. Those are two facts, and they are not mutually exclusive. Aza's feelings for Davis aren't overcoming her mental illness and the way that she feels and those thought spirals, because those are a part of her right now. And at the end, when we have Davis dealing with everything, possibly dealing with depression, or we're not really sure what's going on, but no matter how much he cares from her, he's gonna walk away. They're gonna go their separate ways. I think it's such a testament for early relationships, and like relationships when you're mentally ill, and it doesn't matter how much you love a person or how much you care for them or they for you. Sometimes you're just not in a place where you can be in a relationship, and that's okay, and that's valid. And trying to push past it doesn't help anything. It doesn't change anything. And we come to the end, and we have Daisy still being a rock-solid best friend, even though they have their differences, and even though they both acknowledged, like, hey, this is a thing that you do, and it's not cool with me. It's not nice. It's not right. but they're still friends. They love and care about each other. They work to support each other. And now that they know the things that are bothering each other, they're making the effort. I just can't get over this portrayal of friendship and this kind of first love and relationship when you're mentally ill and with someone who's just not conducive to healing for you, or when you're not in a place where you're healing and you just can't be in that kind of relationship. And I just, I want to make this book required reading for everyone ever. I love this discussion. I love when we can in YA acknowledge first loves and that sometimes they're just not meant to be. Sometimes the timing just isn't right and you're just not in the right place. And that doesn't take away the validity of that love. It doesn't take away their importance or their place in your life and in your heart and in your memories. In the end, I'm trying not to cry, I promise. He has this paragraph where Aza's talking about her future self, but you can also kind of tell that it's John speaking from his experience as a married adult with children who's back in the mind writing for a teenager who has their whole life ahead of them and doesn't really know what's going to happen necessarily. And he says, I know that girl would go on, that she would grow up, have children, and love them, that despite loving them, she would get too sick to care for them, be hospitalized, get better, and then get sick again. And I just think this is so important because since we do have this love can save you trope, we're always kind of assuming that if you're ill despite the people around you, it means that you don't love them, they're not enough. And a lot of times whenever people tell people around them that they're mentally ill, people get offended and they think it's their fault and they're like, what, like am I not enough for you? Is the life that we have together, whether it's romantic, familial, friendship, like, is this not enough? And it's not that, it's a literal sickness, because we never talk about the after, especially in books about mental illness. It's you're here, you're now, you're going through this, and then by the end maybe you're feeling better, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's it. And if there's an epilogue, it's you 10 years in the future, all better, healed, with a spouse and children and a great job and loving life, and you're completely healed. And that's not necessarily it. Some people do recover from mental illness and that's it, and they're mostly better for life, and they're just kind of carrying the scars and the memories with them. But for a lot of people, mental illness is a lifelong battle, and even with treatment, it's never fully gone, and you have to proceed with treatment for the rest of your life, or it's going to continue to come back. And that's so scary to think about when you're thinking about the children that you might want to have someday, and what if you can't be enough for them? What if you can't take well enough care of them because you're still ill? I was just really touched by this particular paragraph in this book as a whole, but I love that he's acknowledging this thing that we never talk about, even though there are 1,000,005 YA books about mental illness, almost all of them contemporaries, and yet this is not something that I see. This isn't something that is a regular theme. It's not something that we acknowledge or we address, even though there are so many of us that are mentally ill and so many authors that are mentally ill, and this still just goes unacknowledged. So that is pretty much everything I have to say for Turtles All the Way Down, and how I think it represented mental illness so well, and I just cannot thank John Green enough for putting this book into existence, for letting me read this book. Obviously, he doesn't even know I exist, but I'm just so grateful that it is here, that I've had the opportunity to read it, and thanks, John. Have a good one, y'all.